Hey, ladies and gentlemen, Dave Paulides here. CanAm Missing Project, a copyrighted edition from our video channel. And this is another production of Huck TV. Huck, shake hands. Shake hands. Oh, that's a good girl. That's a good girl. She's in a good mood today. She's been playing all day. And she did her job. She introduced. She said she was boss, and she's out of here. And that's Huck, the mentor of our channel. So you are in for a missing person segment. And yes, this is a channel that has about 385 videos on it. And you can watch news, because I give a news channel once a week. And I'm in the process of giving a Bigfoot class. And we're going on to lesson 4 this week. So you can watch that. Now this next to me, biggest news we've had in 3 years. I've been working on a documentary. It's called The Missing 411, The UFO Connection. Will be out December 12th. Premiere in November. It's already sold out, sorry. And this is going to be big, folks. I already had some early people tell me that it's off the charts. So I'm really happy about that. So without much further delay, one thing I should start all my videos with: do not buy one of my books on Amazon, eBay, etc. You're going to get ripped off. Those are resellers charging 3 and 4 times the value of the book. Get it on our website for $24.99. Our online store is at NA like North America, bigfootsearch.com. NA bigfootsearch.com. And away we go. Okay. Hey Dave, first off, I'd like to extend my deepest sympathies to you and your family with the loss of your son Ben. I'm a social worker by trade, and I try to be vocal about the epidemic that North America is facing with mental illness. I've been saying this for so long, and the news will not talk about it. Oh, it gets me so mad. Since COVID, our suicide numbers have skyrocketed here in Alberta, Canada, all of Canada for that matter. It is something that is not reported in mainstream news, and it sickens me that people seem to ignore these atrocities. It sickens me, not that the people don't do it, don't acknowledge it, but the government doesn't. It's absolutely bullpucky. And I know Canada was going through the same thing as we are, so thanks for validating what I knew. 2 weeks ago, I had an 8-year-old girl take her own life due to bullying in school. I mourn every loss as if it was my own child, as I have dedicated my life to make theirs better. Every file that comes to me is unique, yet the reoccurring trend of mental illness plays a huge role for each family. Please do not stop talking about this on your podium. I think it's a topic that people need to hear about. And there's some people that get all bent out of shape because I'm ruining their afternoon by talking about mental health. But friends, don't we all have mental health challenges at times? I think everybody gets depressed. Have you ever lost a loved one? Of course. Have you ever seen anybody go through pain and you think, this is horrible? Of course. Yeah, it needs to be talked about a lot more. And unfortunately, the press will not address it. The government doesn't want to talk about it. And of course, they will never tie the numbers to what's happened in the last number of years. They won't do it. But just like this professional said, it's been off the charts. She says, well, I do have some strange occurrences, and here's one of them. Okay. On June 20th, 2020, my good friend and I decided to hike up Mist Mountain and enjoy the natural hot springs close to the summit. Now, that would be fun, to hike up to the top of a mountain and get some hot springs. It was a hot day, so we decided to make our way up early. We drove from Calgary, Alberta, to K Country and arrived at our destination about 10 a.m. This area is notorious for sketchy cell service, so we made sure that we told people where we were going and when we would return. Both of us are experienced hikers, outdoors, women, men, so we always do our due diligence with planning ahead. Thanks to you, I've also equipped myself with a personal locator beacon. Yes, way to go. Every one of you who hikes, hunts, fishes should have a personal locator beacon. Thanks for having that. I've also equipped myself with something that puts my concerns, my father's mind at ease somewhat. Dads are always going to be worried. The trailhead is difficult to find as there is no signage marking where the trail begins. Using trusty AllTrails, we were able to locate the trail, which was off the side of the highway, rather easily. My friend took the lead, and we began our ascent. The trail was not too busy that day, and we did not pass by any other hiking party. The ascent was intermediate and was easy enough to climb with just a set of good hiking poles. We reached the natural hot springs at about 12 p.m. and stripped down to our bathing suits, which we wore under our clothes. We figured the possibility of a change room on top of the mountain was improbable. Haha. We stayed and enjoyed the hot springs and a view for a few hours and decided to make our descent around 4 p.m. Note that, 4 p.m. Yeah, I'm thinking, by the way, that area is gorgeous, and she did send a picture, so it's gorgeous, but I didn't print it out. But I could just see myself relaxing in the hot spring, nearly falling asleep, and knowing I gotta go down that mountain and do all that hiking to get out. I'm all comfortable. Okay, the hike down was steep, but also easy enough with a trusty set of poles. About halfway down, nature called, and I told my friend that I was going into the bushes to do my business. He waited on the trail, and I went down about 20 feet to the brush. As I squatted down, I was spooked by a moose that I did not initially see when I found my spot. Here's where things start to get a little freaky. The moose was running around in a clockwise circle and unaware of my presence. I thought to myself, gee, that's a rather odd piece. Moose do not typically stick around in the presence of humans. I stood back up and decided to find another spot. I went about 10 feet further into the bush and went again, and only this time I became a little dizzy. I may have disrupted my blood pressure. As I stood back up, I realized that everything was silent. I could not hear anything, and it was almost like something had sucked out all the sound. I began to do the one thing you should never do in the backcountry, panic. I frantically scrambled up to the path where my friend was waiting for me. I remember shouting his name, but I could not hear myself scream. I reached the trail, however, my friend was nowhere to be found. I began to call his name with no answer. I sat on the trail for a half hour thinking he may have gone off to relieve himself. He did not return. I contemplated what my next action plan would be and decided to continue the descent down the mountain. My thought was to wait at the vehicle and hope that he was there waiting for me. I was going to give him an earful for leaving me alone, as that's the number one rule in hiking. You never leave someone alone. Oh, thank goodness somebody's paying attention. Thankfully, I arrived at the vehicle, and my friend was waiting with other hikers who were also parked along the side of the road. He approached me swiftly, shouting, quote, "Where the hell happened to you? I was looking for you for 2 hours." I was stunned and explained that I went to relieve myself and became dizzy, so I went back to the trail and he wasn't there. He then said, "You've been missing for 2 hours. I flagged down these people to assist me in getting a hold of K Country Emergency Services to look for you." Both of us looked at each other in shock and confusion. What felt like 5 minutes to me happened to be 2 hours of unaccounted time. Thankfully, I made it back to the vehicle safely and lived to tell my story. I truly believe that I stumbled into a portal, although my brain still struggles to comprehend the possibility. Thank you for taking the time to read my story, and I hope you find it somewhat interesting. It may not be the most bizarre testimony you've read, but there we have it. Please continue to do your segments in nature. I always love it when you do. My family has a cabin out in Montana, and we spend a lot of time in the Glacier Park area. Thanks for all you do. Give Huck a big hug. And P.S. I am of Germanic descent. It's interesting. So a couple things. I've talked to Native Americans about this a lot. Some say it's a portal. Others say it's the ships, our air friends that come down and freeze space and time. And what's happening is that what may feel like minutes is really hours, like was just explained. I'm not sure what's going on yet, but something like that. Hey Dave, I wanted to reach out because I've been following you for some years now. Well, thank you for doing that. I appreciate it. One other thing before I move too far along. If you're not a subscriber, subscribe to the channel. And then you'll get notifications when I come out with new videos. Come out with about 4 or 5 videos a week. And those videos are all different. It's all unique to me. I don't repeat other people's work. I do all my own research. And if you've been unsubscribed, you're one of hundreds, probably thousands, that have been taken away from me by YouTube. I want to commend you first off on keeping up the search for the truth, as well as being so open-minded about disappearances. As someone who has always had an interest in the paranormal and reads hundreds of books over the years on varying topics related to that, I think I can honestly count on one hand how many researchers of these sorts of topics don't jump to conclusions based on the first bit of evidence they come across. I was listening to an interview you did with George Knapp, and at one point you said something along the lines as, quote, "Well, some of the explanations I've heard is that it is Dogman, aliens, Bigfoot, Mothman, etc., and that it's hard to be an expert in all these things," end of quotes. But what if the answer really is that it's all those things, because they are in fact all the same thing? I've heard that thousands of times. Have you read much of John Keel? Oh yes, a lot. I think of all the books and articles I've read on UFOs and big hairy monsters over the years, John was one of the few researchers that believed that all these phenomena came from the same place. He called them ultra-terrestrials. The so-called ETs love to promote the idea that they are from some distant planet, but it's the same old story. They have been around as long as, probably much longer than humanity itself. 5,000 years ago, they were playing at being gods and goddesses, and today they're playing at being at a distant planet. The only thing that never changes is the phenomena. The close encounters, the disappearances, the abductions, they have always happened, and the phenomena just changes to become more current with the times. Anyways, I just wanted to say that I respect your work immensely and keep it up. Thanks for all you do. Thank you. Thanks for hanging in there with me. And I gotta say that it is pretty easy to jump to a conclusion when you're young. As you get older, you'll learn that you don't do that, because there are so many trolls, harassers, idiots, lowlifes, bottom feeders in this world who have never done a thing in the world, never benefited humanity in one bit, that are ready to jump out and grab you by the throat and tell you how stupid you are. Now, I don't need anyone to tell me. I already know that I have my flaws. But it's always amazing to me the ones that jump out and feel the need to do that. Does that make them feel better? I don't know. Very few will ever do it directly to me. In fact, I can only count on maybe one hand where somebody came up and just really tried to trash me. I don't get mad, I just laugh. Okay, the sixth one, I read this and I liked it because it was very boom, 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 boom. And it explained things in a manner that everyone would understand. So if you're a religious believer, if you're not, if you follow a certain religion, if you don't, just hang in there and listen to this. In 2 of your recent videos in the month of October, I heard you reference the subject of reincarnation. I'd like to share with you briefly thoughts of this matter from an Orthodox Hindu perspective based on classical and Vedic text, so this voice is heard in the village. The classic Hindu view is not the same as the dominant visions of reincarnation in the West. In the West, the world is a school in which spirit guides engineer mortal experiences for an immortal individual human personality or a soul to evolve morally. A soul, as a persona, moves from body to body. The modern sources of these ideas are 19th century mystic Madame Blavatsky and psychic Edgar Cayce. As you may have heard, reincarnation is mentioned in the Bhagavad Gita. Oh yes, it is. Ben and I had tons of conversations about this. Death is indeed certain for the born, and birth is certain for the dead. Therefore, you should not grieve over the inevitable. Creatures are unmanifested in the beginning, manifested in the middle state, and unmanifested against at the end. In Hindu thought, unlike in Plato or Western theology, there is no immoral soul or psyche. That is an intact human ego or personality. Individual Hindus may accept such a view, but it is not supported by traditional mainstream texts. This leads to the question, what is it that reincarnates? That's a good question. The individual mind and ego personality are the manifestations of an energetic substructure of nature called the Sanskrit prana. They are grounded in the phenomenal field of experience. In the course of a human life, all mental activity is subconsciously imprinting these subtle mental substructures of prana. These latent impressions are called vasanas. The impressions or vasanas of the current life are woven onto the pre-existing impressions from past lives in a network. Catching this? A critical category of impression is desire. It is desire that is the link that binds us to the cycle of reincarnation. Quote, by means of desires, contact, attachment, and delusion, the embodied soul assumes successively diverse forms in various places according to his deeds, just as the body grows when food and drink is poured into it. I like that. I like that association. In general, when the body-mind complex, that is the material vehicle of that life, dies, the types of prana, etheric energy, which perform various functions in the body, contract and shift to a passive mode. The impression of that life at this time become fossilized with the other sets of impressions and desires from previous lives into the energetic matrix. Passing over the middle period outside of experiential nature for the sake of brevity, when the conditions are optimal, when this latent nexus constructed from the elements of the past will reincarnate into a new vehicle. At that time, some of the buried impressions or vasanas of a previous life will bloom into manifestation like seeds. They may be a mix of previous lives which have been dormant for unknown periods of time or dominant for a specific life. The circumstances, type of body, personality, talent, etc. are all the expressions of these impressions that comprise the psychic energetic matrix. Think about this. Think about this when Ben and I had these conversations. And when you think about laying over one life on top of another, on top of another, on top of another, Leslie Kean has written some books about this and about a very small child who, from a very small age, knew things about a military pilot. And by all impressions, was the pilot when the pilot died. And it's like this little child, there's no way they could have ever known this. So how could that be? So was there a tear in the matrix that allowed her to remember this? Or I don't know. But there's several of these stories in Leslie's books, and you can look them up online. Just look up Leslie Kean on Amazon, and good writer. The process is one that is, in general, eternally driven and folds in accord in... why did I blow that? The process is one that is, in general, internally driven and unfolds in accord to natural laws of attraction. The crystallized impression and desires with all unfold in accord with their own inner nature in the field of experience. This is why seeds is a common motif in Hindu texts. However, the overall process is supervised by the personal theistic god called Ishwara in Sanskrit, so it should not be reduced to an etheric mechanical process like in Buddhism. In the Bhagavad Gita, for example, Lord Krishna says, quote, "These cruel haters, lowest of men, I throw constantly into impure demonic wombs in the cycle of births and deaths. Thrown into demonic wombs, deluded birth after birth, not finding me, they sink into even lower depths." Dave, I apologize for the length, but I wanted to be thorough and hope I was clear. You were very clear, and I appreciated you taking the time to put that down so the commoner like me would understand it. Thank you. See, whether you believe in that or not, how could that knowledge implanted on your brain so that you could go back and refer to it be of any harm? See, I never think that knowledge can harm you. Lack of knowledge and being isolated and told to only hear certain things, that I believe harms you. Hey Dave, my wife passed away this January 19th after a long battle with breast and bone cancer that went to her brain. When we met in July of 2019, Emily told me that she had cancer and that I should know that before we get involved. I told her I had cancer before too, Hodgkin's disease, 1988. I beat it, and together we can beat her cancer too. I believe we were sent together to teach us an important life lesson. I'd like to believe I helped her, and she taught me in the short time we had together. Thank you, Dave, because I believe I too would have succumbed to suicide had I not watched and listened to you, as you showed us your pain and grief in losing your son, and how Ben's loss so deeply affected the loved ones. I realized that I couldn't relieve my pain by hurting and loved ones in my life. Dave, I've followed you for years, and I'm eternally humbled by your bravery in the face of the greatest pain. To yet show all of us that we must do the hardest, most painful thing of stepping forward towards healing from our loss, and not taking the path of ending our pain through suicide, leaving our loved ones to pick up the shattered pieces of our loved one's life. God bless you, Dave. We will one day meet our treasured loved ones. Yes. So this year, I gave a decent-sized donation to a grief group here in Kalispell. Group helped Angie and I deal with Ben in enormous ways. And I think that a lot of people like me carry this for the rest of their life. You can't shake it. But there is solace in knowing that in some imperceivable way, because I don't know, but those letters from people who really have put their soul on the line and said how much they appreciate others talking about it. Well, I appreciate you telling me, because it does help a little. So thank you. Next letter. Hey Dave, incident that I'm going to tell you about occurred on September 25th, 2022 between 7:55 and 8:05 p.m. First, thanks for what you do and bring awareness to all these things we don't understand. Not a criticism, but the object in your poster has rounded edges while the ones I have seen are straight, 90 degree, blocked like a brick. We all see different details, and there are others, I am sure. Here goes. While reading letters, so I should say something. Well, just because your ship is different than my ship doesn't mean anything. A lot of people have said, hey Dave, do you know that that's really a secret U.S. spy plane? Yeah, so? Wait till you see the movie. Just wait till you see. While reading letters just before or after September 25th this year, there was a discussion in this person's thoughts being monitored and somehow related to lights in the sky or the sightings of UFOs. Shortly after that, a couple on September 25th saw lights or lighting in the sky around their house in the Northeast in the evening. To give you some background about me so you can understand what I did during my sighting, just say that I have had quite a few experiences. Growing up as an Air Force brat, we lived at several bases. As a machinist, I worked on my A&P license before getting invited to play in the war in the 60s. Luckily, I joined and wound up in Germany. In the Army, my base hunting and training from my youth was added to the nuclear, biological, and chemical interest during EOD school. What guy doesn't like hearing big booms and blowing things up? With these interests comes awareness that most people don't get to experience, but you don't unlearn it. This training stays with you. Usually I put up my chickens due to predators, then feed the cats living in my shop around dark. We live on 36 acres in Podunk, nowhere, southeast Oklahoma, on the plains. After feeding the cats, I played with them, I stood out looking at the stars. It was a clear night between 1955 and 20:05 hours. That's 7:55 to 8:05 p.m. I noted that the Milky Way was oriented just due north to south. Usually it is southwest to northeast. Oh well, it is the end of summer and just another strange thing to note in the sky positioning. While surveying the sky, I noted a thought. That with the vastness of space, I could probably look at it for a million years and never see anything up there that I'd seen before. That was a thought anyways. To the right, due west, is a big, flat, open pasture, about 450 to 500 yards to the road. Next, about 150 to 200 yards is the cell tower, about 200 yards north of the road that runs east and west. Of course, the cell tower has a blinking white light. I usually note going in the gate as I go in the house. This night I noticed a series of lights east of the light and much higher in the sky. At first sighting was about 9:30 to 10 o'clock in the morning in the sky, and I watched it slowly move over the sky. At about 11 o'clock, it was apparent that there were many lights moving together and the angle of the view changed, guessing hundreds of lights moving in. However, having never seen anything like this before and coming out of my stunned fog, I put my arm out with my thumb and forefinger forming an L. My thumb was pointing southwest, my finger in the front ended the formation. From my forefinger to my thumb is about 2.5 inches. Looking at the length of my thumb to the overall length, I guessed at 1/3 to 1/4 of the lights. Total length of the object estimated to be 8.5 to 10 inches long. The overall impression was something was moving, but not in formation. From the staggered randomness of the staggered lights, they were part of one object. I put my thumb up to see the width of the lights could be covered, and they were not covered by my thumb. All this time moving in an arc from southwest to northeast. It got harder to see, but I remembered to get the compass on my phone and saw it was moving dead at 30 degrees southwest to northeast. Shortly after that, it faded out of view. The lights reminded me of skyscrapers with random lights on at night while going through a city, but with hundreds of them like pin needles in the sheet metal when backlit with a strong light. The light was pure, white like LED lighting. They were very bright, separated, and individual in pattern. Estimated viewing time was about 30 to 45 seconds after the initial shock. While it did not appear to be moving fast, it was covering much of the sky in that period of time. Yet right after the sighting faded, I had this distinct feeling it showed itself to me. The lights were part of a whole and were straight with no curvature. Again, like a skyscraper on its side. As a machinist, a curved surface would stand out, but this one looked flat, set in space throughout the night evening. Thank you for your reading on this. Appreciate it. This prompted me to look at my written encounter on September 25th this year again and send it to you. Thanks, Dave. That was interesting. I'll give you a little bit of a clue on something. Everybody who sees a UFO like this has a different perspective about it. And I'll tell you just on this one. The man, and there was multiple men at the same time who saw this, they were contractors. And the man said to me, I looked at the detail and it was impeccable. It was perfect. And when you think about that, he said I couldn't see any flaws in it at all. And they were close. They were camping, of course. But do you have, when you see something like this, and you have sense enough to think about what you're looking at? Yeah. All right. Got some interesting stories for you. And the first one, Bartlesville, Oklahoma. Let me give you some perspective on this. I've spent a lot of time in Oklahoma with Harvey Pratt. This is Bartlesville. This is Fort Smith, Arkansas. This is Honobi, Oklahoma. Honobi, and all of this area right here up the Arkansas border, lots and lots of Bigfoot activity. Lots. In fact, lots of activity there, tons of activity right here, tons of activity up here. Bartlesville. Until I did this story, I really didn't know much about it. But here you go. So this is Eddie Marling. Eddie was just 5 years old when he disappeared December 3rd, 1959, 11:45 a.m. in Bartlesville, Oklahoma. Bartlesville is about 30 miles north of Tulsa, has 36,000 people today, has a lot less in 1959. Just to give you some perspective, it's the hometown of Phillips Petroleum. Now, in 1959 in December, Eddie was in kindergarten. School got out at 11:45 and kids were to go home and have lunch. And can you imagine a 5-year-old boy, how hungry he is at 11:45? Everyone was let out. And everyone thought, just like every other child, Eddie was en route home. But he didn't arrive home. And his mom got worried, called the school. School said he wasn't there, called the police. And the troops came. The region around their house was very flat, very small hills, and the temperature range for December was anywhere between 25 and 47 degrees. Now, within just a few hours, this entire area of Dewey and Bartlesville was just pouring with 700 to 1,000 searchers, depending on how close to the school they were. They were walking fields, driving roads, doing grid searches. Police were involved. The wardens were involved. The state police and the state patrol got involved. It was a huge, huge effort. And it didn't make any sense. And as the day got into night, the people started to think, well, maybe Eddie's abducted because we can't find him. Well, a majority of the searchers went home at night. But some stayed out. Now, Eddie was 5 years old. According to search and rescue guidelines, on fairly flat ground, without being in the mountains, a child between the ages of 4 and 6 should be found 4.1 miles from the point they are last seen, and that's with 95% probability. 4.1 mile radius from where they're last seen. Now, Eddie wasn't an outstanding athletic kid. He wasn't very big. He's kind of your normal sort. Well, a couple of the guys that held over was Harold Wheelover and Philip Hensley of Bartlesville. They stayed together and they broke off from the main search group. And they kind of went their own way. And at 1:45 in the morning, they heard a dog barking in the bush. Boys didn't even know exactly where they were because they were searching areas that they had never been to. But they hear this dog barking and the dog isn't coming towards them, and it's out in the middle of it's in a clump of trees out in the middle of this field. So they figured the dog was going to come towards them. It didn't. So they went over to the trees, and what did they find? They find Eddie Marling. And the phenomenal thing was, they got to a farmhouse, and they said, hey, could you call the sheriff? And, we're looking for this little boy, and we found him. Sheriff gets there, and he's dumbfounded. He's dumbfounded because Eddie Marling was 9 miles from a school. It had been 14 hours that he had been missing. So let's think about this. That means that Eddie traveled about 0.65 miles per hour nonstop, except small boys and small girls do not travel at night. And that's an overwhelming percentage. That's not even worth discussing who does and who doesn't. The vast majority don't. So Eddie probably laid down with that dog and went to sleep. The dog, doing its job, protected him, started barking, and the boys came over and found him. It wasn't Eddie's dog. In fact, people don't even know where he got the dog, which is kind of weird. Now, he was found 9 air miles from where he was last seen. But as you've learned from me, nobody walks air miles. A 5-year-old, if he's found 9 miles away, he walks somewhere between 14 and 16 miles. So let's up that to like 1 mile, 1.2 miles per hour. How's that possible? How's it possible that he could do that at such a young age and be so far outside the bounds of search and rescue guidelines? He was taken to a hospital, made a full recovery. He was not interviewed. Odd. But 1959 may be a lot different than it is today. Today, I got an email from someone who took up my recommendation and they joined a search and rescue group. And they said that they've been going to meetings and they said it's just very enjoyable. They're learning a lot and they know that they can bring a lot to the table. Thank you for adding something to your community and being of service. Now, I know, because I hear from a lot of you, that you're on search and rescue teams now. And many of you send me updates on different searches and things, and I greatly appreciate it. So was it a complete fluke that Eddie was found? Well, if everyone was following the guidelines and working the grids inside that primary search zone, it could be argued that Eddie would never have been found. Because if he's 9 miles away and 5 miles outside the search zone, who would find him? That's why many search and rescue organizations don't even want to talk about what I do, because it becomes too complex for them. As long as they stay within those search and rescue guidelines and they don't think that anything would ever happen outside, then they're fine. But folks, you got to understand something. I don't know how Eddie Marling got outside of that search zone 9 miles and probably walked 14, 15, 16. But do I believe a 5-year-old did it? No. So if a 5-year-old didn't do it, how did he get there? I know, Dave, I've heard that question from you so many times. Yeah, but think about it. Okay, next case. We're going to go to another continent. We're going to Australia. And we're going to an area that I've been to, the Blue Mountains in New South Wales. Absolutely gorgeous area. And when Angie and I were out there, we met a person. We ended up setting up a meeting to meet some people that we had communicated with online for a long time. A husband and wife that lived right on the edge of Blue Mountains National Park. They were actually from the States. Great couple. Showed us around. This is when I had a broken leg. But learned a lot. And that park is so thick. If you got off trail, I don't know how you'd ever find your way out. But this next case is not an old case. 2014 incident. Sevak, Simonian. Sevak, Simonian, 21 years old, October 20th, 2014. Sevak was living in a suburb of Sydney called Belrose. He attended Galston College and he was working at Dunning's warehouse in their retail store. And he was one of 3 brothers, described as a really happy, easygoing guy, lots of fun, very tight with his family. Someone who loved to take hikes and someone who truly enjoyed the outdoors. So this is his college, which was right near Chase National Park. And in fact, Angie and I investigated a case right on the edge of this area, right near the college. And then his vehicle is found. This is Blue Mountains National Park. Vehicle's found on a road right over here. And his dad found the car because he knew this was his son's favorite hiking place. That's a good dad, knowing what his son did or would like to go. But it was on Kananga, Kanagra road. And he had parked his car, get out, and hike the wilderness. For 21 years old, that's a pretty enlightened soul in my mind. But everybody in his family knew that that was one of his favorite roads to get out and hike. Well, he didn't report to work the next day. And originally everyone thought, well, maybe he's on a multi-day trip. And they didn't think much about it. But then 2 days went by. And he wasn't reported missing until October 23rd. 3 days is the guesstimate how long he was on that trail alone. Well, they started searching. And on the 24th, Massis, his dad, found his car. Police came and processed it. They determined that there was nothing wrong with the car. It hadn't been stolen. There wasn't any blood. There wasn't really a crime. It just appeared that he had gone and hiked there. Well, Australian contacted their emergency services group, and they came out with an air wing. The National Parks and Wildlife Police responded. They had multiple canines respond. The New South Wales Air Ambulance responded. Rural Fire Service came out. Bushwhacker Wilderness Rescue came out. This was not some half-hearted effort like I read about all the time. 3 to 5 days and call it. No, this was not. They knew they had a 21-year-old man, college student, that was in the prime of life that could logically and arguably survive a long time in that bush compared to somebody old and gray. So they gave it 18 days nonstop looking for Sevak. Well, this has now been 8 years. Nothing's been located. He's never been found, even though they had a point of where this all started from. A couple of things about this that are hard to understand. They had his car. You have a car, you drive it every day, it's yours, you're the primary person that's in it. There's a lot of odors that go with that car. A lot of things for them to give to the canine to pick up your scent and to go for it. But none of the canines found him. Again, one of the primary things I look for in search and rescue: success of canines. None here. Now, the Blue Mountains National Park has a lot of missing people. And if you go to my video page, well, you're on my video page, if you click on that little logo on the bottom left that says CanAm Missing Project, that'll take you to my videos. And at the very beginning of this channel, Ben and I went out and did a lot of videos together in Colorado. But then when I did a book tour of Australia, I filmed a series of disappearances in Australia, interviewed a bunch of people. And so you're there in Australia and you're watching. So please go and take a look, and I'll see if I can link some of those sites to this. Troublesome case. And I'm sure a family is absolutely heartbroken that Sevak has disappeared. Rest his soul. Next case. Jamie Tennison. Missing October 15th, 1992, 4 p.m. Why is 4 p.m. important? Because if you've studied my work, you know that 4 p.m. is the optimum time for people to disappear. Now this individual, Jamie, disappeared while hunting. It's a picture on the Minnesota State Missing Person website. That's his rifle right there, I believe. So Jamie was with his dad, Jim, and a family friend, and they were grouse hunting. Now, the Savannah State Forest outside of Cornish Township, Minnesota, it's about 45 miles west of Lake Superior, important point, because that's where a lot of disappearances have happened, and 100 miles north of Minneapolis, where more disappearances have happened. Now, Jim had forced Jamie to take a 3-day outdoor survival class to learn how to survive in the outdoors should you get compromised. Jamie enjoyed hunting, camping, fishing. He was a general outdoorsman. And his friends, when they were interviewed, said that Jamie was more prepared for the outdoors than most men have ever been. Little story about grouse. First of all, they're gorgeous birds. Angie and I were hiking to a spot fishing here in the mountains, not too far from here. And we're walking, kind of bushwhacking through this trail, trying to get to this small stream. And all of a sudden, right in front of us, I'm kidding, it probably was 5 feet in front of us, this mother grouse comes up, trying to scare us, because she probably had little ones right there. And she succeeded in scaring us. It jumped off, flying, and then took off. But it was right there. That's the first time that's ever happened, but grouse are gorgeous birds. And they are hunted a lot because they taste really good. So the group, Jamie's group, arrived at their hunting grounds that day at about 2 o'clock, kind of late. And they decided that they were going to all split up. 3 of them were going to go in all different directions. And they agreed to meet back at the car at 4 o'clock. Now, the important part about all this is important to know. So, this is Lake Superior. This is the search zone. This is Leech Lake. This is the Leech Lake Reservation. I spent a lot of time here, and I sent Harvey out here to do some drawings because there were a ton of Bigfoot sightings here. And this area right in here had tons of UFO sightings. And of course, remember Lake Superior had a UFO sighting by the Canadian military, who requested that the U.S. scramble an Air Force jet to go out over Lake Superior and intercept the UFO, which it did, and the UFO and the jet disappeared and were never found. So this region of Minnesota, lots of strange stuff going on. Well, at 4 p.m., when everyone was coming back to the car, Jamie didn't come back. Everyone was there waiting, and then they decided to go out and make some calls in the woods, see if they could hear him, or they didn't hear anything. There were no gunshots. And after a couple hours, Jim called the Aitkin County Sheriff. The sheriff arrived that night, organized search and rescue, and had all of the troops arrive the following day, October 16th. Well, when they arrived that morning, there was 4 inches of new snow on the ground, and temperatures were in the 20s. And Jim Tennison was concerned because his son had been out the day previous, and it wasn't that cold, and he wasn't dressed that warm. But the search and rescue teams were put into grids, and then they were told to march arm in arm and cover an area. And then they also had helicopters and planes up with heat-sensitive FLIR that were looking for any heat signatures on the ground at all. Canines were put in, and they used helicopters and planes. At one point, the SAR commander questioned Jim about Jamie's ability in the woods. And Jim told him that he felt that Jamie was very well versed into survival. He didn't believe he had a compass or matches. And for that he was concerned because it was getting so cold. Well, Aiken County sheriffs gave the Tennisons 5 days of search and rescue. And then after that, after they pulled out, the family and friends came back over the next year multiple times looking for their son. Now, the Tennisons were from Grand Rapids. And they felt they had to do something because they lost their boy. Here's another picture of Jamie. And I know about that need to do something. I've met family members that have done all types of things. They've written books. They've gone out and done presentations in front of civic groups. They've done all kinds of things, trying to keep the memory alive and trying to do something good. Well, Jim Tennison did something even better than all that. He got a hold of the Minnesota State Fish and Game. And he told them that he'd like to contribute something to hunter safety. And he'd like to write a pamphlet about how to use a compass and explain Jamie's plight as reinforcement and the importance to understand how to use a compass and to carry a compass all the time. Well, what happened was the Minnesota State Fish and Game bought into that hook, line, and sinker. And Jim and them together worked and they wrote up a pamphlet. And part of the hunter safety now by the state of Minnesota, they give out a compass to every new hunter. And they teach them how to use it. That's monumental. That's really doing something good. Taking something that was horrifically bad, negative, and doing something good for society. Jim Tennison, good job. Well, 40 miles to the northwest is a cluster of missing people. And 30 years, Jamie's been missing. And they haven't found anything. His rifle's always going to be there. His boots and belt are always going to be there. And ask yourself, where did all this stuff go? How could canines not have tracked this? So when I was up there at that Leech Lake reservation property, I'll remind you again, that was this over here, not very far at all from this. So as I was here, I interviewed a whole series of people about their encounters. And somebody said, Dave, I don't really know if this applies, but they told me about this name of this person about 20 miles away. He owned it was a body shop on one of the 2-lane highways. Drove out there, met with him, introduced myself, and he goes, oh yeah, hi Dave, how are you? Thanks for being here. He says, yeah, my group, we actually study UFOs. And Dave, there's a lot of UFOs out here. He says, many times they're hovering over water or very near water. His words, not mine. He said, sometimes we get multiple sightings in a day. Said that every once in a while they'll hear about an abduction. And then he said that many times the Bigfoot sightings that they have in this area are in conjunction with a UFO sighting. UFO down near the ground, a couple minutes later they see a Bigfoot. Or they see a Bigfoot and then they start seeing things in the sky. And he says this has been going on for as long as he's lived in that area, which was decades. Northern Minnesota, very unusual. And to think that Jamie Tennison hasn't been found in 30 years, and his rifle hasn't been found by other hunters in a state forest, I find that really hard to believe. It's not that I don't believe anybody. It's hard to me to understand that with the thousands of people that have treaded that ground in the Savannah State Forest, that nobody's seen anything? What? It goes against everything I would think it'd be true. So, Australia, Sevak Simonian, missing, never found. Eddie Marling, 5 years old, found 9 miles away. But as you know, nobody walks a straight line, especially a child. And a 5-year-old walking 14, 15 miles when search and rescue guidelines say 4.1 miles or less 95% of the time? Come on. And lastly, Jamie Tennison, October 15th, 1992 in Minnesota, Cornish Township. Please do me a favor, folks. Pass this around to everybody you know. And then that trailer for the movie, if you could pass that around to everybody you know as well, I would be humbled and honored if you did that. It would help us immensely get our word out. Because yeah, a lot of people watch our videos that we post every week, but that is a primary way we get the word out to a large amount of people quickly. And that helps our cause. So I hope your week goes good. We're in for a cold one in Montana. It's starting to rain, got snow in the near future. It's in the low 40s, going to be in the low 30s tonight, so I'm ready. But thanks for being here. Remember, we've got that Bigfoot class online too for you, and you can read it, watch it, take part, do the homework, and share with your friends. Huck's out there sleeping already. I know it. Executive producer, she comes in, demands, and then leaves. And you guys have a great week. Be nice to your neighbors. Do something nice for somebody at the store this week. Paulides out.